to do something a little bit special, and I wanted to walk you through what was going on in my head as I was putting together this pitch deck for my venture studio that I'm setting out. Welcome back to the Idea Supply Chain, where we take a look at where ideas come from and what makes them valuable. In today's video, this is literally talking about what makes the ideas valuable in terms of securing investment. And so I wanted to walk through my thought process as I was setting this deck up and using it to craft a story and get conversations started. So let's go ahead and get into it, and I'll walk it through slide by slide, kind of what's going through my head. So in the first slide, I wanted to really capture the mission that I'm working toward, and that is all about building human-centric, data-informed systems. I believe we've completely abstracted humans away from the systems that we create, and we need to start putting them back at the core of what we're doing. We're focusing too much on these systems that scale instead of doing what Paul Graham says we should in the early days of a startup and do things that don't scale. And the things that don't scale are the things that help individuals truly become successful. By creating systems that are human-centric, this forces us to focus on the fact that we are designing systems for people first and foremost, and using data to inform those systems. And I feel like this captures that very, very well. So here's kind of the introduction to the architecture. So it's time to build a human-centric internet. So again, human-centric, around a new open source architecture called the Nexus. Cool. So I take kind of the grand vision and I solidify it just a bit. And so now, okay, there's something new about this, a new architecture. So this is kind of the way I'm connecting the mission to what I'm actually doing and how that will start affecting changes. So the problem, we are limiting human potential with poorly designed systems. Again, this goes back to the idea that we are not centering humans within our systems, and instead we are creating these very poor abstractions of humans that represent people in our systems and don't give us an actual full vision of who these people are, what they care about, etc. I want to shift that narrative quite a bit. All right, so here we break it down into more detail. So the what? Closed source applications and siloed data architectures limit the collective knowledge and potential of humanity. So this is a core belief. I don't believe in these kind of closed off groups of people who are making decisions that impact millions and millions of people. I have been a proponent since the beginning of things like build in public, open source, everything. And everything I create is in alignment with that because, frankly, I think it's slowing me down if I try to keep anything a secret. In fact, I want this architecture to allow people to build on it openly and efficiently without relying on me to maintain it. And that is a big piece of this architecture. It needs to belong to people who aren't me. And then, as I noted there, learning and knowledge transfer are really at the heart of our economy. And any of these knowledge jobs, knowledge workers, right? It's all about constantly learning, understanding what's happening in the world around you, learning new techniques, and constantly trying to improve because, let's face it, everybody else is. And if you want to maintain your position, you got to keep running that race of keeping up to date as much as possible and understanding how to perform as effectively as possible in whatever role you're currently in. And so why? So this limits the growth that we can achieve because it limits the communication that can happen because, oh, this is a secret, that's a secret, can't share this, etc. And because we're limiting what can be communicated, the things that are communicated are not complete and therefore can lead to misunderstandings, incomplete, transmission of ideas. It's a whole thing. Makes it very, very complicated. This architecture actually simplifies a lot of that because it doesn't worry about all the stuff that I've figured out doesn't actually matter when it comes to learning and knowledge transfer. And so we've got this idea that it's all comes down to these numbers on a spreadsheet. And so we use this concept of business to say oh, well, we can't share this stuff. But again, things are evolving so fast. I can't keep up on everything myself, and so I want to be able to rely on others to be sharing knowledge as I'm sharing knowledge, because these like combinations of what we learn and can apply in different ways are really going to advance the acceleration of the economy. And I do believe that we need to accelerate the economy. Check out my video on Econac, kind of a spin-off of EAC if you're familiar. That's a good way to kind of get my understanding of what needs to happen acceleration-wise. And so why now? Like, I think really the main point is the introduction of LLMs that enables this architecture to happen very, very simply, because we can essentially create a network that allows people to operate it or machines. And so this is used with like simply an API of language. We can send actual like textual thoughts and take action based on that. And LLMs really enable that to happen. So this is the perfect time to introduce this new architecture and create this network that can work with humans or machines, humans or AIs, right? All right, so talked about the problem. Solution is a new open source architecture of the internet called the Nexus. Again, kind of a restatement of that initial connection to the mission. And again, so we kind of like give a little more detail here. So it allows people to connect through ideas. And so I kind of played off of the idea, and like instead of having people work and communicate through like business requirements, right? And then that was kind of a joke in terms of like, you know, you've got features and like, oh, we decided that this type of mechanism is actually going to be the most effective for whatever metric we're tracking. And very rarely does it come down to like, oh, what do people actually like doing? And if you're like me, like things like Slack and Discord and email, all of that sucks. And I hate it. And frankly, it pains me to have to use stuff like that. But that's how we communicate. And for some people it works, some people it doesn't. I believe it should all be a lot easier. And so in this case, I'm really focusing on capturing human thought and taking action based on this. And the whole idea is removing the middleman. I don't want everything I think to have to go through Google to land me an outcome, or to go through social media where I've got to craft my thought and make sure that it like fits whatever the algorithm is favoring that day so that can actually be like shared. No, fuck all that. I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm not going to. Instead, we've got the Nexus, which allows me to jot down thoughts, take action, cut out the middleman. That's the whole point. It makes it very, very simple. And when things are simple, they could be more easily reasoned about. All right. So quick market potential slide. I had to quote Eric Ries, the Lean Startup. The only way to win is to learn faster than anyone else. And so I threw this in there because I think it really captures the value of moving information quickly, which is exactly what the Nexus does. The whole point of this is to communicate and to do everything as quickly and efficiently as possible by minimizing the amount of input and maximizing the amount of leverage that can create. And so the whole purpose of the Nexus is to increase speed at the individual level, because that's how we help the individuals win. All right, time to start talking about the business model. So starting off, it's all with my AI co-founder. So the reason I'm starting off with that as kind of the initial implementation of this Nexus architecture is because it's as simple as possible. So I'm taking the idea of a single founder, you know, indie hacker, solopreneur, whatever you want to call them, who all they want to do is get things done as quickly and efficiently as possible. There's a single decision maker, and everything kind of spawn out of the mind of one person. I do have a team kind of feature that I will be adding to that, but in the initial implementation, it's a single player sort of thing that the individual can then leverage, you know, focus on the speed of execution and working at the speed of thought, if you will. So the next stage is actually for creators, because this is kind of the like one-to-many connections. And so the creator here doesn't want to control the actions of their audience, but what they want to do is they want to be able to get insights, and they want to have a line of communication to their audience. And so what this does is this next version will allow creators to really tie into their audience's thoughts and help deliver content at the time of thought. And they can use that to then set up like content feeds and whatever order they want to set up. There's a lot of customization there for the benefit of the user with the data that comes back directly to the creator. And this will allow them to really deepen that relationship with the people in their audience and be more aligned with the content they create, as opposed to it being skewed by, again, the Googles, the social media, whatever it takes to try to get people getting their eyes on your content. This directly connects the people to the creator, and allows that content connection to happen at a more organic level, which will be much more valuable data for the creator because it doesn't require nearly the large numbers that a platform like a Google or Facebook or Twitter do to give you kind of the statistically significant information, because it doesn't actually rely on the concept that the audience members are all the same. And so you don't have to figure out what's the same between all of them. You can focus on like very, very individual people and make that connection yourself as to where that connection lies, and not do it in kind of just whatever the data tells you that connection is. And then the final step is actually kind of the agency nexus. And the reason I chose agencies is because these are high value companies that have a huge focus on learning quickly and being like most up to date on whatever technology, because that's really where their money is made. So they could take all of these high value, brand new skills and deliver them at scale to a number of different companies. And so this is kind of this many to many operation. So, you can kind of see the transition of like one-to-one thought to action, one-to-many, like the connections of thoughts and actions, and then many-to-many, like there's a bunch of moving pieces. You've got lots of clients, lots of people in the agency. That information needs to transfer quickly. And so my prediction is that I'll be able to use this architecture to really enhance the value that agencies are able to provide. And then I'll be able to capture a percentage of the value that I create for these agencies, leading to an incredibly profitable business. All right, let's talk competitive advantages. So first of all, it's an open architecture that allows me to align incentives with people I don't know. I don't need to hire people. I simply need to state what I need, put the work out there, and let it get done. And so I don't have to be limited in the number of people I have access to at any given point in time. It's all very, very collaborative in nature. And any work that somebody does for me can also be used to help them leverage that into future work as well. So that's actually going to be a really huge advantage. Also, the existing big tech companies, they have plenty of data. They're still trying to figure out all the insights they can possibly gain from it. They don't see the data that they're missing because they have so much data to work with. And that's the key point that I have, because I see the data they're missing, and it's all the data that relates to the individual people and what they actually want, as opposed to going through, very, very narrow communication mechanisms in terms of like what information is actually being shared. This limits that and allows me to have much deeper, much more meaningful connections and get a much higher resolution of data than big tech companies are used to. And so that's going to be another huge advantage. Quantum economics. You might have heard me talk about that. I talk about it a lot. That allows me to model the value of data collected today in the future. And the important thing here is I need to think about it in terms of collecting the data, organizing the data, presenting the data, and setting up future outcomes. And so the whole idea with quantum economics is by focusing on the people involved in the system and showing them the data that's collected. So instead of acting as like a business entity, I'm more acting like a mirror. I'm collecting the data and holding it up to the individuals so that they can use that to make determinations about what they want to do. And so from this standpoint, I can quite easily see many, many ways that I can collect this data, put it together, and turn that into profitable products and services down the line. Because I understand what my users are going through. I understand what they're doing. I understand what they're thinking. And they know that I'm in this to help them because they have access to the same data I do. The whole purpose is to show them, okay, here's the data I've got. Here's my recommendation based on that data and why. And then it's up to them to say, oh, that makes sense or it doesn't. But it's all a very, very transparent process. And because it's transparent, I can accurately predict what the value is going to be down the line, at least in terms of magnitude, if not the specific like amounts. And kind of the fourth competitive advantage is like the flexibility is endless. This is an entirely new architecture for the internet. And so there's plenty of work to be done. I can build pretty much anything on top of this. And so I've got this very, very structured approach that I want to solve problems in order. But it's really going to touch on a bunch of different aspects in life and will allow it to be easily stacked. And so the nice part of this architecture is because it's a shared architecture among an infinite number of products, everything can stack on to each other. And so really the hardest part is getting the person to start using the new architecture in whatever model. And maybe that's going to be via my AI co-founder, maybe it's going to be via one of the creator things, or maybe it's going to be part of one of the agency models. But once they use that, then they can start tacking on all sorts of different tools and services and everything that can fire off of their thoughts based on what they actually want to do. And so after the initial onboarding and getting used to using the platform, everything else can just add on to that. And therefore, just focusing on getting people on the platform makes this incredibly valuable because of how much you can just add on with essentially zero cost. And that part is the most powerful piece of this advantage because it's all about getting started. And then once it's started, it's a very sustainable ecosystem that will continue to grow. So competitors. So this is where I just laid it out there that I am taking shots at the biggest players in the game. So I'm looking at Google, I'm looking at social media, and I'm looking at data enrichment platforms because all of them have different issues when it comes to data and kind of how they're sticking themselves into the middle. So with Google, it's all about they're trying to capture the connection between like people, who are searching and trying to capture that at demand time, and then use that to kind of sell on to the people supplying the information, setting up the ad model. And if you've been on Google lately, you understand how the screwed up incentives really have ruined the experience of looking for stuff on Google, because it no longer feels like you're actually looking for stuff. It feels like you're wading through shit to find what you're looking for. And that is just not a fun experience. And so they're number one on the list. I think search should be kind of a more peer-to-peer thing as opposed to big tech company in the middle. And so that's going to be one of the things I really explore as part of this architecture. Social media, kind of the same way, except they're focused on holding and owning the relationships between people. But if you look, that's not how people actually work. Like relationships are a very nebulous thing. They don't fit into these like nice little boxes of followers on friends, all of this. Like we've tried to set up these rules around relationships, but unfortunately by doing that, we influence the communication that takes place between people. And so that's why in the Nexus, connections are available to be made, but are owned by both sides of the relationship, and either side has the freedom to break away from that at any point in time. The network has no ownership over the connections that are made between people on the network because sometimes people suck, right? Like, and we need to give people the power to maintain their, network perimeter, as it were, however they see fit. And frankly, like, I don't believe in the ability of Twitter or Facebook or any of those platforms to be able to do that effectively because it's a really hard problem and cannot actually be solved by these like closed off networks, because that's, again, not how humans work. And then finally, kind of these data enrichment platforms. So basically, there's these companies that go around and scrape together all of this data, and you can use it to like send them an email, and they'll give you back all this information about the person, where they're working, maybe what their demographic data is, like job history, all sorts of stuff, right? So they compile data from all sorts of different sources all over the internet and then provide that as a service to fill in information on people. Frankly, that whole thing kind of feels yucky to me. And so this mechanism with the Nexus can actually kind of provide the same sort of capability, but only with the permission of the participants in the network. It has to come kind of more directly from the source. So because of like the distributed data model that this uses, the thing you want to do is like maintain that connection and have the ability to query for that data at the time of the request, as opposed to owning it and then selling it on as a kind of a third party. And so this really makes sure that all the data that's being shared is being shared from the original source to kind of confirm the validity of it and make sure that it's all kind of like ethically sourced, if you will. And so I really wanted to make it clear that, yeah, I totally believe that these platforms, or these types of platforms, really, it's not even like specific ones, it's certain types of this old school way of doing things that I think are extractive in nature and really detrimental to the internet as a whole. And so this Nexus architecture can actually replace all of these. And I think this slide does a pretty good job of showcasing how wide the potential is here. Next piece is actually the fundraising. And so I've kind of broken it down into 3 levels here. So the initial raise that I'm looking for is kind of a $1 million raise. Most of this is to offset the freemium offering with my AI co-founder. All the use that's going to accrue is going to rack up bills before I can necessarily guarantee that I'll be able to provide the products and services that will pay for those. And so this initial raise is really just to make sure that I have the money to get all of that set up and not have to worry about affecting the quality of the initial freemium offering before I need to actually like charge money. I think it needs to really be done this way to maintain the purity of the data. And so this is a trade-off I'm not willing to make. If I absolutely have to, I will figure out other services and things that I can do to offset the cost. But this initial fundraise is really just to make sure that I have an idea of some sort of runway, and I can make sure that I can offset those rising costs as I start building out the products and services around the network architecture. And so I predicted that can kind of take me to a level of about $1 million annual revenue with very high probability of success. I think that should be extremely reachable with that initial fundraise. And then the next piece is a $4 million raise, which is really all about, okay, the architecture's out there, now it's time to scale. Want to be able to offer grants and things to people building new things on the architecture. And so this will really allow me to branch out from just the stuff that I'm doing and start supporting what the community around it wants. So this piece is really about like pulling in resources into the ecosystem and then distributing them around in ways that will actually make the ecosystem way stronger. And so this will really be geared towards helping out people who have demonstrated an interest in the platform and will be used to kind of reward people who are early participants in the network, if you will. So you may hear some things that rhyme with a lot of the things people say in crypto. But if you notice, I have not mentioned crypto once. So there's a lot of the same ideas, but the crypto is actually not required in this. It can be used at a number of different places, but it is in no way required. And then finally, I'm looking at doing crowdfunding. Because I am partnering with a lot of creators, I do want to open up audience participation in the future upside of this venture studio. And so I'm setting it up to be able to do an equity crowd fund, which will allow people within the audiences to easily participate in the ownership and the future upside of this venture studio. And based on my understanding of regulations, that's a $5 million cap. So that's kind of where I've set that. And that'll really be used to just go back into the creator ecosystem and help fund projects and things within that ecosystem that the creators bring to me. And so I'm going to be using some ways to kind of figure out the best ways to deploy that with the help of the creators I'm partnering with. All right. So with that being said, here's kind of the timeline based on that. So my AI co-founder is in the process of going live now. I was able to get some early feedback, got a ton of great ideas and just feedback on everything from what I showed to people. And now I'm in the process of implementing that and getting it live to a larger audience. The next step is the Creator Nexus. I have partnered with a couple of creators already, and I've got a few more potentially in the pipeline, and a few bigger names that hopefully I will be able to secure at some point. But that'll really be the next phase. And so that should take from kind of Q2 of this year up through the end of the year to really get ramped up. And then kind of into the agency nexus, which I realize I have Q4 of 2025. It should actually be like Q4 of 2024 into 2025. But that's going to be kind of the bigger scale thing, and will kind of just be based a lot on the learnings from kind of the first two products in terms of scaling this out to be something very, very agency focused and able to really enhance the value that agencies can provide. So the initial step is my AI co-founder, work at the speed of thought. So this is kind of just a quick outline of the features that kind of exist within that. So there's this automatic task identification. So as you think, the things you need to do get identified. This is actually really important because that sets up the next thing, which is the task marketplace. So by being able to identify the work that needs to be done and putting it into an open marketplace, you can actually gain an understanding of the value of work that needs to be done. And so this creates a very powerful data flywheel that will allow me to build up this powerful marketplace mechanism that I can use to create or to collect data that will allow me to build very, very powerful agents that can understand the cost of work that needs to get done in terms of the overall value created. And so once it sees how much the task it's working on is worth to whoever's requesting it get done, then it can make determinations as to which work to do based on the cost. And so it can make kind of this cost benefit analysis on its own. So I also have dynamic tool generation. And so basically you can take a thought and send it anywhere. And that can just trigger things to happen. This is a very, very powerful feature because it allows for effectively anything to happen. And so the key here is setting it up with some very, very focused tools at first that I'm creating. And then over time, I'll be opening that up to the users themselves where they can just add on tools that they see fit. And then kind of the next piece is the assistant marketplace. So one of the things I've realized is, though I don't like featuring chat as the main interface, instead just focusing on capturing thoughts, I think it's very helpful to have some sort of chat interface. And one of the things I was looking at was creating a marketplace of assistants that people can use. And basically, hey, send this thought to an assistant focused on this task. Two of the initial ones that I'm going to create are a research assistant and a like a creator. And so basically take this thought and find out everything you can about whatever and bring that back to me. And then, hey, here's the thought. I want to create some content around that. And so having a chat assistant that can help from that standpoint will also be valuable. And so that's kind of one of the premium offerings that I'm looking at, as well as setting up this marketplace so that, again, I'm not the only person offering these tools, because I don't want to be. I want this to be bigger than just me. And this is one of the great ways for making it happen. And then so kind of just a note then, I've got great validation from early users, and it's in the process of being launched wider with the new interface / experience kind of based on the feedback I received. So yeah, the team. So it's me, and then the Spark Podcast Network, which is kind of a loosely named group of podcasters, creators that I've been working with, who have already kind of bought into the idea and are going to be helping me test. So that's going to be kind of the first set of creators that I'm working with. And then open source developers. So it's a worldwide source of talent. And so I know that I'm not necessarily the best engineer out there, but I will take me plus the world over any other small team any day, because I can have very, very specialized people providing very, very specialized services in tandem with each other without a huge level of coordination required, because again, the architecture kind of allows for that, allows for breaking things out into very small pieces, and sharing just enough context to make sure that everything gets created in the way it needs to be created. And then a thank you slide. And so hopefully this gave you some insight into the way I think about all of it, and hopefully even more so it will help investors see how I think about it. As I was going through it, I realized that some things that were more obvious in my head maybe didn't come through in the slides. So I would love any feedback you have on where the things I talked about seem to really diverge a lot from what you were seeing on the slides. That feedback would be incredibly helpful because, I more eyes on it, the better, which is again why I'm kind of sharing this publicly. But I also think it might be helpful. I've designed a lot of pitch decks, and none of them really worked, but this one I actually feel really strongly about. I think it did a good job of capturing my overall vision, and might need some tweaking here and there, but overall, I think it was pretty decent. So let me know what you think. Hit me with what you got, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.